All right, are we live? We are live. What's up, everybody? As I just check a few things, I want to see where exactly this made me live or live, as it were. I'm testing out some new software. Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. So that is working out great. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. So how's everybody doing tonight? Feeling good? Feeling juicy? Yeah. I'm going to read more spooky stories. So, I have these catalogs of things. Thanks, Andy. Welcome to the party. Thank you, Nate, as well. I'm testing out. Okay, cool. So it's showing me all of my chat. So if you guys could let me know if this is working, I'm going to just respond. Yo, Andy, can you see this? I hit juicy.
Here's something from Google.
Oh, it pops up on there, and my phone is talking to me. This is the future. ASMR time. I want to read you guys something spooky. How's that sound? You guys into being spooked? Ah! Yeah, I'm sharing it through Restream, so it's on all of my platforms simultaneously. So if you're on my YouTube, awesome. If you're on my Twitch, all these things I want to read. This is so cool. I guess it's going to post on screen. I guess it will keep saying, I'm going to read a spooky story. So here's something fun. I guess it'll just put, I've never used Restream before, so I promise I'm not trying to bide time here. The story's been sitting forever. So that is crazy. Okay. Oh, then I can control showing it on screen. So I can show like Callie's. Oh! Or Mike Mission saying the F word. All right. So here's what's up, everyone. So we're going to do another one of these. Are we down? Do I have enough people ready to go here? I don't know how long this one's going to read. I have wanted to do this as a little spooky story for a while. So hopefully there's some nice, should I put like a little creepy music loop? Maybe that'll help. We get a little 3 hours of scary and ominous music. Perfect. Can you all hear that okay? If I could get maybe, oh, Andy, this is the story about how you smell like cheese. Does that, can everybody hear the music okay? Is it too much? Give me a commentary. Ooh, it's not very scary. I'm going to turn it down some. Andy smells like cheese. There we go. That's what we need right in there. That's for all the streams now. Okay, everyone, here we go. Here's a little creepy story. Hopefully one day I'll turn this into a short film for all of y'all. Shout out to, I don't know how things work. Shout out to, there we go, to my sweet flame LED light bulb and my old IKEA lamp from back when IKEA was cool. Louder with the music. Okay, cool. It's a good volume. I see. How could he not see? Let's go a little louder. Okay, cool. So there we go. All right. Read The Unfuckables, Choose Your Own Adventure, The Lady Boner Killers. I cannot wait, Christian. That is actually the story of the year. Everyone, huge round of applause for Christian here. Christian, as I told you the other day, my first stop after I read these creepy stories would be to go to Boomtown Biscuits and bathe in your butter. All right, everybody, you ready for this? Are we good to go? I feel pretty confident. I really like, if you're not using this, Restream.io, it is amazing. So, I love this, that I can put your comments up. Okay, so here we go, just for everyone. Let's start this off, shall we? For the past 2 years, I've put out monthly episodes of a video podcast called Creaky Footsteps, a casual tour of various supposedly haunted houses in my general geographical area, the eastern part of South Carolina. It's consisted of little more than me shooting some footage of an abandoned house somewhere, narrating it with text based on dubious local legends, some of which I must admit I created myself to bolster all of my content. I began to get more and more subscribers over the course of the podcast, though I was never more than a one-man operation. For the second anniversary episode, I decided to do something a little more ambitious. Last Friday night, I got off work at my small IT company in Charleston, and after grabbing a quick dinner, I started driving north, and in 90 minutes, I had crossed the state line. In another 2 hours, I had entered a part of North Carolina that I'd never been to and was wholly unfamiliar with. My destination was the town of Lenore on Onslow Bay. The town was considered the shame of Pamlico County, if not the entire state itself. It was apparently a suffering backwater connected to civilization only by the rural Route 78 called Loon's Neck Road. Once, long ago, it had received cargo boats at its rundown docks, but that had stopped in the 70s. The town had less than 1,000 people left, and in fact, it had become the largest incorporated area with the fewest citizens in all of North Carolina. Every part of it had fallen into neglect, judging from the few photos that I'd seen online. Not helping matters was a book published by some hack in the late 90s called The Town with Many Eyes, a collection of allegedly true campfire tales ascribing all kinds of supernatural upheaval to the place. I'd never read it. It was only because the town had developed such a reputation, in fact, that I had refrained for so long from doing some sort of episode of the podcast there. Like, it almost seemed too obvious. I was only 30 minutes away from Lenore when I'd begun to look for signs to Loon's Neck Road when my cell phone rang on the seat beside me. When I said hello, I was greeted by a voice I didn't recognize. A man introduced himself as Vincent Molbeck, a historian. He didn't know me, but he had heard I put out a show about haunted places, and he'd seen on my website that my next episode, scheduled to be released 2 days from now, was going to be about Lenore. I confirmed this information, a little confused about how this person had gotten my phone number in the first place, but it really honestly didn't occur to me to just ask then. This man, Vincent Molbeck, spoke to me very plainly and directly in a flat and entirely unemotional voice. To answer your question, Callie, Lindsay's hiding in the other room. She's sleeping through the spooky stories. In his flat and entirely unemotional voice, he asked me to please not to go to Lenore. Like, not at all. For it could be very dangerous to me. His tone in the phone call was so serious that I almost laughed. Like, it was incredibly disorienting. When I asked him what he meant, he said he wasn't at liberty to explain, but he had no stake in what happened to me beyond wanting to warn me or anyone with me that something was going on in Lenore that was a threat to anyone inside the town. I was at a total loss. I told him I was in fact headed there right at that moment, and there was a long silence on the line. When Molbeck spoke again, he reaffirmed to me that this was a terrible mistake and that my life might be at risk. I asked him to back up and explain from the beginning how he had come to call me, but suddenly the line went dead. He had hung up on me. I lowered the phone from my ear and focused on the long, dark road ahead of me, trying to replay the brief conversation in my head while navigating by the light of my high beams. The area was growing more hilly, and there were still some patches of snow and ice on the road from a light dusting the night before. At last, I felt I had to just slow down to about 30 miles per hour just to process everything more easily. There had been a certain familiarity to Molbeck's name, and something about the way he spoke. If he was a nutcase, he was completely convincing. Like, I wished for nothing more than that there had been some inkling of hysteria in his voice, but there was none. I stopped for gas at a place called Morton's and walked to the edge of the tarmac to clear my head. I checked Molbeck's number and dialed it. The connection was terrible, but there was no answer anyway. So to make myself feel better, I then walked up to the cashier's window and asked the man there for directions to Lenore, which I really did need. I lost my place. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just did that. Here we go. I'm fired already, everyone. So I asked him for directions to Lenore, which I didn't really need. I just wanted to know if he'd come out with some, I don't know, superstitious nonsense. And of course he didn't. I asked him specifically if he'd ever heard anything strange about the place. And he had not. So I got back in my car and drove on. Soon, I saw the first mention of Lenore. The word was printed alone on a small brown metallic sign. It said only how many miles away it was. Steering with one hand again, I placed a call to my wife, and she picked up on the first ring. I asked her if she'd given my name to someone named Vincent Molbeck, and she said no, so I asked her to do a quick search of the internet for me. She said she'd have to call me back a little bit later. She was visiting relatives in New York at the time, and when I told her where I was headed, she surprised me by telling me that she was worried. She said she had read some things about Lenoir in the past and honestly wasn't crazy about the idea of me going there alone at night with a video camera. So, of course, I told her and I reassured her. I was like, I'm going to be fine. And I was on Loons Neck Road in about 20 more minutes after that. It truly was a seemingly endless country drive bending away from the ocean with nothing but depleted fields and marshland on either side. No cars seemed to come from the other direction, and no one was behind me. Soon, a sign even smaller than the first one I'd seen let me know that I'd finally reached my destination. Again, there was just that one word, Lenoir. I entered on the town's south side, which looked like it had once housed the industrial district. There was a collection of decaying brick buildings, most of them unmarked, a couple with signs that looked like they were at least 50 or 60 years old. Only one street light in 3 was working. Now, not having any specific map of the town, I cruised slowly east toward Onslow Bay, which I reached in about 5 minutes. Beyond two or three abandoned hotels, and more like flop houses by the look of them, and a series of dark warehouses, there was a port. 2 piers jutted out into a narrow part of the bay. There were no boats in sight. I couldn't tell if a single one had even been here recently. It certainly did not look like it. I bypassed Lenoir's main street, which was the usual collection of shuttered shops, and got more into the residential part of town. I went past something called Bill Williams Elementary School, and then there was a stretch of cheap row houses that went for more than a mile. I started to worry that I hadn't planned enough and that the building I was looking for would take me forever to find, but I lucked across it soon enough. Off Towerview Road, there was Mason, and it dead-ended at St. Anesius Church. This place was the main reason I'd come to Lenoir. I parked to the side of the road in my choice of spots, since there was nothing near the church but an empty field and some cracked tennis courts surrounded by a chain-link fence. I took my camera and my heavy-duty flashlight and got out of the car into the cold. Looking around me, I saw no one, and it occurred to me that I hadn't seen a single soul in the street since I'd gotten there. 2 cars had driven past me, but that was it. This was on a Friday night, a little past 11:30. The church itself was dark, not a single light visible from outside it, but that was expected since the place had been shut down years before. I walked up the steps to the front doors, expecting them to be locked, but they weren't. I looked briefly behind me to see if anyone was watching, but of course there was no one, so I pushed the right-hand door inward just a little bit. It was incredibly heavy, but it opened with no problem. I decided to go all the way in and close it behind me, turning my flashlight on since there was no electricity. So there I was, inside St. Anesius Church, which had made Lenoir briefly famous in 2004. Instead of tearing it down, they merely stopped using it, but apparently the building was going to remain at the end of this little road forever. Half of the pews had been ripped out, like exactly half, just the ones on the left side. There was no longer any altar, no adornments of any kind. The stained glass windows were still intact, but there wasn't much else to signify that services had once been performed here. There was a tiny bit of light after all, and seeing it nearly sent me back out into the cold for the shock of spotting it. On the filthy floor in the center of the church was a single candle sitting on what looked like a dinner plate. The candle was thick, and it had once been fairly tall, but it was wearing down to almost nothing. There was so much burned wax surrounding the candle that it might have been burning for a day or more. Someone had been here fairly recently, so I shone the beam of the flashlight all around, now super paranoid that I was being watched, but it really seemed like I was totally alone. Now, you all know me. You know by now I would have normally set my video camera up on its tripod and, shot some video, especially since I had never expected this lucky break of actually getting inside the church. But I felt I wanted to be out of there fast, so I just quickly got a few handheld shots of the interior for the purpose of overdubbing the narration later. Here, I would say, right here, 6 children were found in 2004. None of them yet harmed, but drugged and then literally taped down to the floor between the 2 aisles of pews. Taped down clumsily with electrical tape so they wouldn't be able to move if they awoke. On each of their palms, someone had painted a symbol of an eye divided in 2, with a clear gap between the 2 halves. Inside that gap was a 6-pointed star. In the back of the church, Father Pat Tarkington was found stabbed to death. Parked outside had been the van that had been driven by the woman who'd abducted the children 6 hours before from a nearby playground. This was the culminating incident in a chain of recent cult practices that had brought this sinister aura to Lenore that obviously would stick forever. It was said that there was not one but 2 cults working in the town, leaving drawings on the sides of buildings that showed an eye split down the middle. Vandalism had occurred, assaults, arrests, yet absolutely no one ever admitted involvement with any cult until 2004. The woman who'd abducted the children had apparently agreed to cooperate with the authorities, but 2 days after her arrest, she'd been found in her cell dead of a heart attack at age 26. Far stranger was the fate of the children who had been taken and branded with black ink. They were all dead by 2009, all of them. And of course, of various causes, 2 car accidents, 2 cases of leukemia, a brother and sister both dead in a fire. And so Lenore, already a place that people didn't really like to talk about, was branded a cult town. Its population had dropped 50% in less than 10 years. There was just enough information about what had happened to give rise to endless speculation, and not anywhere near enough facts to really know what was going on here, if anything at all. So I got my footage of the interior of St. Anicia's church and turned to leave. I shone the flashlight against the doors and saw what had been painted on them in letters 4 feet high. 12, 19, 19. It was today's date. Wanting to be out of there right now, I opened the doors a crack to peer out into the street. The moment I was sure that there was no one out there, I left the church, moving briskly down the steps. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe again until I was inside my car. And once I got in, I did that thing we do where you kind of force a little chuckle out just to make yourself feel ridiculous for locking the door in the first place. Like nothing was going on, right? So I started the car right up and pulled away from the curb. I wasn't leaving, not just yet. I didn't want to leave until I had a little more footage of the town, and after I had confirmed the rumors about Lenore's lack of cell phone reception, that they were entirely true, I had to take care of one last thing. So I drove past the tiny post office and spotted a payphone beside it. I parked again, and I called my wife. She seemed incredibly relieved to hear from me. She said the reason that the name Vincent Molbeck had sounded familiar to me was because he was connected to the case of Ralph Broglie. And Ralph Broglie had been a prisoner in maximum security in Montreal and died during an apparently botched exorcism. Molbeck, who was now a wanted man in Canada, had been the name of the man who had hired a pair of exorcists who had accidentally or otherwise drowned Broglie in an empty part of the prison after they'd been smuggled into the building somehow. I had no choice but to tell my wife that, yes, if it was the same Vincent Molbeck, I had spoken with him that night, but I wouldn't give her the details. I assured her I was leaving Lenore on my way back home and that nothing out of the ordinary had happened here and that I would just explain everything later. I get back in the car. I cruise slowly towards the north side of town, pointing the camera through the windshield as I'm driving, just to get whatever rough shots I could. I wasn't going to have the fortitude to do my usual 2 to 3 remotes here. I would maybe come back later, preferably during the day, preferably with a friend, but most likely at this point, my adventure in Lenore was over. Weird, though, I still saw no one on the streets until the north part of town, which was entirely residential. I could make out what looked like 2 people running across the road ahead of me, far in the distance, from one side of the street to the other, and then out of sight. Now, about 2 minutes later, a car came in the other direction, and it visibly slowed as it approached me. I actually sped up. I was super unnerved, so I glanced to my left as I passed the car, but I couldn't see inside it. When I saw that it had stopped completely, I took an immediate right turn and sped up. Thankfully, the car didn't follow. Another left took me into a more wooded area. I didn't want to turn around, so I kept going. I realized I could very easily get lost. I tried taking one more right and found myself in a very quiet part of town, all single-story houses, and there's like a private school. A cemetery came up on my left, or more accurately, a gravel path that led back into said cemetery, and I assumed that this was the Crown Point Cemetery, a photo which adorned the cover of the book, The Town with Many Eyes. It was the one story in the book I'd actually really read and paid attention to and was fairly familiar with, having read it on some website. This one actually had a little bit of validity to it. There were, newspaper sources, things of that nature to back it up. So I turned into the cemetery, which had no gate. I bumped along the gravel very slowly, going past wildly uneven rows of very old tombstones, some probably dating as far back as the Revolutionary War. The cemetery would have been quite ugly during the day and was even more so at night, pockmarked with random rises and depressions, scraggly weeds, and unkept grass. The path went back about a quarter of a mile and then stopped abruptly. The tombstone I wanted to look at was reportedly taller than all the others. Otherwise, I would have never found it being set about 20 feet off the path. There was nothing remarkable about its design, only supposedly its inscription. So I stopped the car in the middle of the path. I killed the headlights, grabbed my flashlight and the camera again, and got out. I felt confident that no one was around. The tombstone belonged to a man named Curtis Palliser, the man who had founded Lenore. As soon as the beam of my flashlight fell across the front of the stone, I saw that in this one case, legend was actually true. I read the inscription twice before I took some shots of it for the episode. Keeping in mind that Palliser had been an importer of impeccable reputation during his life, with not a single whisper of any wrongdoing, this is what I read. God pity his soul, and forgive him for his wretched deeds. And let men be watchful that he does not stir from his slumber beside the beast. Born 1780, died 1867. That was it. Palliser's original tombstone had been secretly replaced by persons unknown sometime in the 7th winter after his death, and there, for some reason, this one had stayed. Since then, no one had ever uncovered a single plausible story from the past to bring shame to his name, not one. Yet there was the inscription, and no protest from anyone to remove it. A couple of snow flurries landed on my hands as I hiked out of the cemetery. Back inside the car, I tried to find a weather report, but every station seemed to be speaking from under a blanket of static, so I gave up. I sneaked down the road where a more working-class set of houses stood. There was one whose front door was wide open, leading into total darkness, and one where a Doberman Pinscher stalked across the lawn slowly, tracking my car until I was out of sight. I turned onto Kingman Street, and my headlights picked out something in the road up ahead. It was a human body. I pulled over and I left the engine running and I ran out. As soon as I saw it, I knew the guy was dead already. The trail of dark blood that ran from him flowed all the way from the side of the road. He lay face down on the pavement. I turned him over and saw that he had been stabbed at least a dozen times through his sweatshirt. He was about 50 years old, his eyes wide open and staring. Kingman was in unusually dark roads, and there were houses on each side. I let the man go and ran toward the first one I saw. There was a single light on its side, a feeble one, so I knocked on the door several times, trying not to make it too forceful lest I scare the people inside. There was no answer, and the windows on the lower floor were just too high for me to see into. I left the house and ran across the driveway to the next one. There didn't seem to be much life in there either, but I had to try. Again, though, there was no answer to my constant knocking. The fact that there were 2 cars in the driveway told me that there must be someone home, so I moved to my left and raised myself on my toes to see into the living room. What I saw there sent me around the back of the house in a frantic attempt to find some way in. I climbed over a short chain-link fence and crossed a small back lawn to a porch where a grill sat uncovered. The back door was ajar. Without thinking, I just went right in. I found myself in the kitchen of this house. There were lights on in here. I saw dishes in the sink. Beyond that was the living room. And another body. It was a woman sitting in a rocking chair. On the TV set in the corner, the DVD menu for a documentary about the Civil War played on and on. The woman had no visible wounds, but I have never I've never seen a look of terror like that on her face. Or on a face like the one she had. It had gone almost completely white. Her hair was even cocked at a strange angle, strands of it thankfully obscuring her eyes. I had no idea how long she'd been dead. There was something on the wall behind the television, something scrawled there in what looked like black paint. From a distance, it might have passed for an accidental blotch, but looking closer, it was obvious that I was looking at a crude drawing of what appeared to be a dead tree. I assumed it was meant to be little more than a silhouette. It stretched from about chest level almost all the way to the ceiling, and that was it, nothing more. I looked for a phone there, but only briefly, and when I didn't see one in the living room or the kitchen, I ran out the back door again, frightened of spending a single moment more in that house. But outside wasn't much better because I couldn't get over the feeling of being watched, and it was constant now. I ran through the backyard and climbed over the rear section of the chain link fence onto the next property. There were more lights on in the house in front of me than any other I had seen, so I tore across the backyard, nearly snapping my foot when it came to rest on the edge of a rabbit hole. There was no back porch, just a back door, and I turned the knob before even knocking. And of course, this one too, it was open. Just like the house across the way, and the kitchen was the first room upon entry. Everything seemed very neat and clean. I called out for anyone, but there was no answer. The contents of the living room suggested someone here was moving in or out soon. There were a lot of things in crates and boxes. The television set was dark, so I called out again. No answer. The sense that something was horribly wrong here as well sunk into me quickly. Almost a physical sensation in my chest. I could feel it in my lungs. I went to the staircase in the corner of the room. It was unlit, and I found the courage to start up the stairs, but I couldn't bring myself to call out any longer. It scared me too much to make any sound at all. Even my quiet footsteps on the stairs as I climbed them was too much. I stopped when I saw a very small streak of paint, black paint, that had smudged a corner of the wall at the staircase's blind turn. Sensing how dark it was up there, I turned on my flashlight, and then I just stood on the third step with my back to the wall, trying to control my breathing for a full minute. There's no way, I thought, there's no way that I could go up the rest of those stairs, but it was at about that point that I became someone different, someone almost unrecognizable to myself. Some bizarre, primal need to see what was up there took over despite all of my common sense. It honestly was like an out-of-body experience. The belief that I was so close to death, my own death, actually pushed me closer toward it. I turned the blind corner, and there were 6 more steps in front of me. I had to use the flashlight now to see. The beam shone up into the hallway above, and before I even took one more step, it caught a bare human foot just beyond the top one. The rest of the body was hidden from view behind the near wall. When I got to the top of the staircase, the rest of the image came into view. It was a woman lying face down. She'd been moving toward the bathroom at the end of the hall when she'd fallen from her wounds, or maybe been pinned down while they were inflicted. I turned the flashlight to my left toward the bedroom she'd obviously come from. When the door was open, so I walked toward it. It was pitch black in there. I no longer cared or even minded. My reality now had become so nightmarish that I was treating it all like a nightmare, just something unreal. I crossed the threshold into the room, and this time the killer, or killers, had painted the tree above the headboard of the bed. There had obviously been a terrible struggle. A lamp had been knocked over. The sheets were totally ripped off the bed. The headboard itself had been dislodged and was broken. In the end, the man inside the bedroom had been overwhelmed. He was in the corner of the room below an open window, and there was more black paint there. Today's date had once again been written in rapid and almost illegible slashes. Through the window, I could see the upper windows of the house beside this one. All this was obscured by a foul odor of something burning or having recently been burned. It was stronger near the corner where the body lay, so I trained the flashlight there again, longer this time, and moved closer. What I beheld, it was an impossibility. The man's skin had been charred black from head to toe, including his hands and his bare feet, but his clothing was not even partially singed. He wore a Tennessee Titans sweatshirt and gray sweatpants. None of it was damaged. but himself, like his body, as if the victim of some sort of spell, had been utterly immolated. No stab wounds either, only this freakish burning. Something else of note, he had been holding something in his right hand when he died, still clutching it tightly. It was a knife, but it wasn't a knife like one I'd ever seen. It was double-bladed, almost as if the blades were like fangs and thick, 8 or more inches in length, with a wooden, intricately carved handle. I suppose he had meant to use it, but it looks like he never got the chance. I didn't even run out of the house. I went down the stairs with one more glance at the dead woman and walked out the front door as if I lived there and just crouched on the lawn and looked off at the body that was still lying in the middle of the road. In that moment, I wanted to lie down on the grass and just close my eyes and never wake up. But I forced myself back on my feet toward the road. My car was still idling, I saw. I had forgotten I had left it running all this time, and no one had taken it. No one had touched it. I was truly alone. I got in, threw the car in reverse, and I turned completely around and started driving back the way I'd come. But my mind had no conception of where I really was. I couldn't focus at all, so I drove blind, forgetting completely the turns I'd made to get here. I just drove. On the fronts of 2 consecutive houses on Windbale Lane, images of trees had been scrawled. It slowly came to me in little pieces, the rumor and gossip that I hadn't processed correctly before. 2 cults, the newspapers used to claim, and not only were they not aligned, but they were at war with each other. All nonsense, right? All of it, none of it proven, none of it understood. The sort of urban legend that took hold in a quiet town and eventually died. Well, I finally saw a real living being in Lenore well past midnight. 1 street over from the Silent Bay, someone was sitting on a swing in a children's playground beside a daycare center. At first, I just saw a shape and then the outlines of a face under the glow of a weak, nearby streetlight. I pulled the car over to the curb and killed the engine. The person sitting on the swing didn't even look in my direction, so I got out of the car and just stood for a moment about 50 feet or so away from the playground. The man and I, for I could now see it was a man, looked at each other. I finally dared to approach him, crossing the sidewalk and moving past a jungle gym. I told him I needed some help. He looked at me blankly, not responding at all as I walked toward him. He was a man of middle age, well-dressed. I barely heard him ask me in a low voice, and he asked my name. He knew my name. I stopped, and so I immediately turned and I asked him, I was like, "Are you Vincent Molbeck?" And he nodded slowly. I asked him what had happened here. I am now trying to remember his words as best as I can. To my first question, his only response was that Palliser's children had lost. The tree would rise again. To my question about whether he had called the police and if someone was coming to help, he merely shook his head and said it didn't matter now. I didn't know what to ask next. Before I could venture another word, he stood up from the swing and advised me not to get back in my car, that it was best not to be seen. He did say, though, it would all be over soon enough, but I might be able to make it out of town if I wasn't seen. To this, he added that he was sorry he was too late in coming here, and he lifted his right hand to his mouth. He put something in it, something incredibly small, and swallowed it. Maybe a second later, he collapsed where he stood, all at once as if he had been shot. He emitted this sick cough when he struck the ground. His left leg pounded again and again on the patch of dirt in front of the swing that had been worn away from the impact of so many children's feet, and his body twisted as if something were climbing up his spine and he were trying to shake it off. And then suddenly he lay still, dead, on the ground before me. I didn't touch him. I didn't try to revive him. I knew it was useless. My decision as to where to go next was made for me when I turned to look down the street. In the pool of yellow light thrown by a street lamp 100 yards away or so, I saw 2 dark figures running in my direction. One of them was holding some long, thin object in its right hand. There was not enough time for me to make it back to my car, so I turned and I ran across the playground into the darkness toward the empty ball field behind it. I made it way farther than I thought I could. When my lungs felt like they were going to seize up in the cold, sheer adrenaline took me forward. At no point as I ran across a faded baseball diamond into the woods at the end of the field did I look behind me. It was only when I tripped over a heavy stone and slammed into the ground that I stopped. I rolled over and looked through the trees at the stretch I had crossed. saw no one. They'd given up. Once again, I was alone in Lenore. This time, I was in a place where no one could see me, and that's where I wanted to stay. I lay on the ground, my face pressed into the frost for a couple minutes, and then I got to my feet and headed deeper into the woods that bordered the bay. I wasn't sure where I was walking, and it didn't seem to matter. It was just enough to be off the streets, out of sight. My mind was still working well enough at this point to check my cell phone once again in the futile hope that I'd get a signal of some sort. But again, there was nothing. I didn't have my flashlight with me, and the woods were thick, even in the middle of winter. I stumbled forward, trying to keep calm and keep my mind a blank. As I adjusted, my night vision brought everything more and more into focus. The stars were perfectly clear above me. They shone enough light that I could make little things out. Initials carved onto a fallen log, an empty soda bottle lying beside a stick shaped like a W. These were the things around me when there came a sound that stopped me. The wind had just risen unexpectedly, colder than ever, and when I heard a low moaning that seemed to be coming from ahead, but also behind. The moaning, it became something more within seconds. It was almost as if the earth itself was in pain. The sound rose and rose, and I just looked around me desperately. Another layer of sound emerged, something I must describe as a voice because there's no other way to describe it. Low, angry, bellowing, one unending cry of rage. It got so loud that I put my hands over my ears and cried out. That's when I noticed maybe 200 feet before me, a giant, shrieking mass of darkness was rising toward the sky. Something that was growing rapidly, reaching upwards and dwarfing everything around it. It was a tree, 10 times wider than any other tree in the woods and sprouting 1,000 branches. It sprung up from nothing. As I stood there screaming, the sound of its rage crushing whatever I could summon, the tree began to shake as it grew and grew, those long branches waving and cracking violently. I remember a bright star suddenly disappearing as the tree's upper reaches blocked it, so high now that within a minute it felt like it would scrape the clouds. I felt blood come out of my ears and trickle down each cheek as I saw and felt my eardrums burst. The monster's branches lanced out, and I saw several of them snap off with the force of its deafening quaking, falling to the ground below like people hurling themselves off a high ledge to their deaths. That unearthly roar, it had to have traveled for miles. I felt it seize up my spine, and I collapsed to the ground, certain that I would be dead any moment. The tree began to bend to the left and right as if it were trying to rip itself free of the ground. I saw a branch the height of a low airplane descend toward me, striking the trees that protected me and snapping in 3 pieces before falling out of sight. Then, only about 50 feet off the ground, the most awful sight of all. Clinging to the tree that wrenched itself in all directions as if buffeted by a windstorm were human-like creatures that proved to be actual humans, but naked and streaked in filth. They were attempting to slither down the trees toward the ground. They were all over it, climbing downward in fits and starts as they could manage, reaching out and grasping the bark with pale hands adhered to the trunk somehow. Even so, amongst the dozens of bestial humans born from the tree, I saw 3 or 4 of them flung off, losing their grip and falling into the darkness. One fell from a height so vast it appeared in the sky, tumbling downward as if it came from nowhere. I was on my knees, my hands clawing my face, my lungs stripped from shrieking, when everything went mercifully black. The last thing that I felt was a single leaf blown by the wind striking the corner of my mouth. A minute detail like that really sells to me how real it all truly was, so that now, as I sit in the basement of my house writing this down, I have confidence that I am not at all insane. They found me on the side of Loon's Neck Road, 2 miles outside of Lenore. I spent a day in the hospital recovering from my injuries, telling no one my story until it was forced out of me by the police, who consider me a prime suspect in the Lenore murders. there were 14 people killed, and alert reporter discovering that all of them were descendants of Curtis Palliser. The killings were obviously the work of many, of whom they think I may have been the leader. I told them everything except what happened in the woods. I don't think they believed me when I told them that Vincent Molbeck had committed suicide. The memory of his face when he took that pill is what most makes me believe that whatever happens to me is immaterial. The world may end itself soon for all I know. Something's been released. Something has grown. Now, there may be no monstrous thing in the woods visible to the human eye, but that doesn't mean anything. The truth was there with what Molbeck did, or maybe it'll just be Lenore that's stricken. That's something to hope for, though when I finally wake up from my nightmares, it feels more likely that winter won't ever be leaving for any of us. There we have it, folks. That was our story for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it, Booze and Ish. Sorry I couldn't read any of your comments back, but I hope you all enjoy doing this with me. I always have a great time reading stories for you all. Do you guys like this sort of stuff? Should I keep reading creepy, weird things? Do we like that one? Oh yeah, I can actually see all of your comments now. It was this dick. Abandoned buildings turned me on. Oh, Sean Casey, Chris Lee, Callie, Marshall, all kinds of lovely people. There's so many great people in this chat tonight. Sorry. Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate that one. So this is written by a guy named Soren Narnia. He writes a bunch of weird stories, and I really love his work. And a few years ago, I reached out to him as I was a fan of his work. I was like, man, I want to do some stuff with your content. And he gave me access to all of it, which was super cool and kind of a rare thing for creators because, you know, our intellectual properties are all kind of that matter. So anyway, I always try to show a lot of love to Soren for having this kind of stuff out here. And yeah, read them and respond to comments. I would love to respond to comments, but it's hard for me to read simultaneously. So I feel like it would have been better if he didn't narrate the whole thing by himself. Yeah. Well, the nature of these, Hector, Mike Vision, Creep for Life, the nature of these is that usually they're all single protagonist stories that are kind of narrated back in this journalistic fashion. But yeah, I really like that one. I kind of want to do something interesting with it. My goal for a few of his stories, if I really ever did end up turning this into a series, was that I wanted to use the character from this one because one of the things I like about Soren's writing is that it's always like this weird thin veil between creepy stuff and reality, and then it's always just like one or two people who pierce the veil, as it were. It's always in kind of a minor way, in a weird way. They're always left. It kind of reminds me of Lovecraft, minus like the racism and misogyny. But they always, I feel like most of the protagonist is always left somewhat unharmed. So I like the idea of this character being the through line here, and that they host a show that does this kind of stuff. I thought that'd be a lot of fun. Actually. Man, by the way, for those of you doing live streams like I've been doing, I cannot say enough things about this restream. I'm getting comments from every single platform that people are watching on. It's streaming simultaneously to my Facebook. It's on my YouTube page. I think it's on my Twitch even. So it's very industrial era American weird fiction. Yes to Lovecraft. Yeah, see, Greg knows what's up. So I second one I've watched feels good. Reminds me of the old days when people would sit around on the radio and listen to stories. Super dope. Let your mind be your guide. Sean Casey, I love that. I totally agree. Let's give a little shout out for Loudmouth real fast. If you guys don't know Sean, he's got a little shirt line there, which I think I promised to buy a shirt a while back, and then the end of the world happened, and I haven't gotten it yet. So Sean, we should make that happen once we're allowed to see people again. Unfortunately, Hector, I did once look up Lovecraft's cat name, and yeah, it is unfortunate. It's a terrible name. I don't agree with him naming his cat that. I don't think anyone should ever use the word rather that he used to name his cat. It's awful. I'll just spoil it. He named his cat the N-word, I'm pretty sure, right? Like, it's terrible. H.P. Lovecraft is a terrible person who wrote a couple of interesting stories. That's terrible. People sometimes are creative. It's awful to hear. So hopefully I'm not terrible to any of you. But yeah, I would love to do I would love to do. Oh yeah, Beavis. I would love to do more of this stuff. So if you guys want, maybe this seems like a good time. I feel like this is a good use of my skills and talents. Is reading creepy single stories like this with my fun. I keep doing that with the other way. I would never make it as somebody on the news doing the like. Okay, well we've got a front coming out over here and moving this way because I keep using the wrong hand. Yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. Is everyone doing great? Are you all feeling good? Is there anything? It's not how it's found. It's apparently a guttural sound like Cthulhu. Oh my gosh. That's terrible. Well, we are in Kentucky though, so I'm not super surprised by people being awful down here. Not to shame an entire state, but there is a reason the stereotypes about Kentucky exist sometimes, right? And it's not always true. But if you were to pick a few states in the country where you'd assume that someone might name their cat N-word, I bet we're on the list. I bet Alabama's on the list. I would bet Arkansas is on the list. We drove through Arkansas once. It was the worst smelling state I've ever been in. Do more creepies. I love it. Callie, you know what? I would love to do more creepies. And thank you so much for the kind words. I hope all of you are enjoying this. If you have any requests, or maybe you find a short story out there. You know, Neil Gaiman, he gave everybody access to his stories to read for this kind of stuff. So he's a super awesome guy. It probably turns out that he's not an awful creative. Just like me. Thanks, Neil. On that, I guess I'm going to go ahead and kill this. If anybody, if you have any other requests, let me know, and I will try to keep this semi-regular for everyone. Andy fell asleep to the story. Oh, that's the screenshot we all need to know. Hold on. I'm going to go ahead and take that screenshot while I look sadly down at the screen. Cool. Got a lot of good Andy screenshots today, by the way, just to let you know. Ohio to Indiana. You know, before I leave, of the tri-state, I feel like Kentucky always gets the most shit, but we all know that Indiana might be the secret worst of all of it. It's kind of like when people are like, I hate Mondays, but we all know that Tuesday is really the worst day of the week. It's false Monday. False Monday. You know, because you're like, Monday, at least you can kind of pretend like there's a little newness to it, and, it's a fresh start and all that shit, but Tuesday you're like, yeah, Tuesday, 4 more days to the weekend. But then again, days don't matter anymore. I don't even know what day it is now. It's Sunday, but yeah. Thank you so much. My voice is like milk and honey. H.P. Lovecraft's favorite weird tales, full of great ones. I'll check those out too, Greg. I would love to read more to all of you. Oh, well, on that, for real, I am going to jump off here if I can figure out how to kill the stream. I love this. Restream.io. Hell yeah, Mike Bishop, Indiana. Indiana is the Alabama of the North. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I did. All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I will see you soon.